I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is market historian Bob Hoye. He's the chief investment strategist for institutionaladvisors.com. Merry Christmas, Bob.
Yeah, and a good hearty ho, 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 ho to you and our listeners.
Yeah, and hopefully people are saying, well, who's laughing this time of year? We just get a report. The Canadian economy contracted 2% in October, and we end off the year with a horrible fourth quarter.
Yeah, I don't know how that came in. All I was looking at was the U.S. third quarter, which of course ends the end of September, and it was positive. And then look back and you realize that a whole lot of things turned positive around June. That was when we had it was early July when we had the big sell on the long bonds, on the U.S. Treasuries and Government of Canada bonds, but that was just technical. But here you then up having a reason for it, that at least in the U.S., there's been a lot of positive vibes around, and we had thought maybe that whatever was troubling the markets could sort of clear themselves in November, and, seasonal lows, that sort of stuff. And then, of course, you had the election, which was a surprise to most of the street, and the market has been factoring in that you have a pro-business administration, perhaps the most pro-business administration since Coolidge in the 1920s. And it's a remarkable reformation, that's what I've been calling it. And then you've had the further reinforcing on that with the appointments that Trump have been making. Wow, these are very, very talented people. And so I think the potential for reform is being seen as, moving right along. And, of course, on something like this, the new administration has to move fast while its opposition is sort of still reeling from the surprise. So you've had terrific rally in the banks. Now, that was keyed off from earlier in the year when the yield curve turned to steepening, and that favors banking spreads. And the banks in U.S. and Canada have done very well enough that they got up there and generated some technical excesses on the upside. So we have been looking for a correction in that hot sector. The base metal mining side got hot because you had Teck, for example, has coal and base metals, and so you've had terrific rally for the coal sector. Some U.S. coal stocks were then anticipating the Trump win, but a lot of it came immediately with the election. And so what we've been writing is, yes, it's pro-business administration, but it will take some time to effect change, and there will be huge opposition to it from the usual suspects, the Democrat Party and the media that supports the Democrat Party. And you also have, you have the U.S. many government agencies are supportive of the Democrat Party and in league with the media against Trump. So it's not going to be easy, but he has an effective team. So our decision in early in November was, okay, we're not brilliant enough to make all of the calls on the political side, but what we would do is just say, let the technicals tell us and let it run. So you're now up to getting overbought. As I said, the banks, the financials, the base metals, they're past that. So the market is telling us that it's overdone, and then more recently we've got the spreads are likely to change, and so there's change afoot. We're looking for a positive crude oil market, perhaps through to February, March, but in the middle here in January, you can often have a seasonal decline in crude oil. So that was the killer one last year when crude dropped to $26, and very oversold. So anyways, you can have a little check back in here. The other one on the big stock market is that when you have a very dynamic market going into December, often a good high can be set in this window. We call it the turn of the year phenomenon. And you also have the small caps, like the Russell 2000, outperforming the general market, and that in turn helps the general market. That has been happening. So let's wrap it up on this one and say that a change is underway with the pro-business new administration, and it looks like it'll be well supported by the Republican House and Senate, and also they've picked up. As the summary was, is that it's the strongest Republican position since the 1920s. It's quite remarkable. So that will help bring in reform, but nonetheless you have formidable opposition with the Democrats and the mainstream media. So what we want to do is then to say, note that the overbought in some of these hot sectors, calling for correction. Some of the corrections have started already. And on the senior index, they can continue to correct down into the new year. We're just at this moment calling it a correction. There's nothing that one would say that this is a major peak in the stock markets. Just a correction.
Bob, do you think we're going to see in the new year a correction like we saw last January and February?
Oh, well, boy, that was a killer, but that one was really tied to crude oil, and it was a fantastic decline. Mind you, I would call it fantastic because we were looking from 2014 for crude to fall to 1/3 of its high, and I think the 2014 high was $1.05 or $1.07. So that worked out. 1/3 decline was to about 37. And then at the time, I figured that we might just do the very long term and say conventionally can go maybe to 27. But the panic jammed everything in, and bang, right down to 26 in January. And it'll take some time to kind of get enough confidence back in the game where you can set up the next major decline. So we're just calling for a correction in crude, and that will correct the stock market, and it'll also correct the action in low-grade bonds. Gosh, the junk and stuff like that have been terrific price-wise, going up in price and down in yield. And the credit spreads have been narrowing. That's been on just a fabulous move since the panic that ended in February a year ago. So, I was talking to one of my friends today in the business, and we're both getting been in the business for over 50 years, and you just say this is, it is a privilege to be upright, and it's also a privilege to be in these financial markets. in the most fascinating time for markets. And then, of course, you've got the political change going on, which is, well, we've been describing it as the greatest political change in 400 years, in the sense that it is a change from authoritarian government, and we could call the movement a great reformation, and it will prevail for quite some time. It'll come and go, but as fortunes change and as the business cycle changes, but basically the trend now will be to reform excessive intrusion and excessive expenditures by governments who went unlimited. It's been fascinating to watch as governments went unlimited, but it'll be even more fascinating to watch how individual citizens in the United States take back control of the government out of the hands of bureaucrats and experts and the mainstream media. So it's a great time to be vertical.
We'll have more with Bob Hoye right after the break.
GEM International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. GEM International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
Welcome back. We're talking with Bob Hoye. Bob, have you ever seen a president-elect have so much influence on the world? I can't recall anybody heading for office making huge statements that affect the markets every day. Trump, for example, saying the proposed Air Force One jet was just way too expensive, so he wants to cancel that. Then he says the F-35, it's costing too much. So why doesn't the U.S. government just buy more F-18 Super Hornets, because they're proven to be successful airplanes?
Yeah, but you've got to go to the next stage. They already got the F-22, which is an air superiority plane, and the F-35 is all-round ground attacks, and it's got out of control. But I think this is to let the whole system of government industry know that there's a new cop on the block, and the drive will be to less costs and a better bargaining stance. This again is part of what I would call a great reform, just early stages, of course. But after the 1500s was a period when an experiment in authoritarian government went right out of control, and it corrupted the Catholic Church, which became bureaucratic and venal, and the ordinary folks in the early 1600s thought, this is too much in my way. Let's reform it, which they did, and it was very difficult. But you had a lovely example was in England, what was called the Glorious Revolution of 1688, where you had the last of the absolute kings. He was authoritarian, he was Catholic, and he wasn't too pleased with the way politics were going in England and threatened to bring French troops over to impose his authority. And the Brits have always had a regard for freedom, so the revolution, it was more a reform, but they call it the Glorious Revolution, radiated out of, the business and financial merchants in London, plus individuals and smallholders, farmers throughout the whole country had enough of intrusive government. And mind you, you then had to have a king, so they brought over William of Orange, and that ended up being a virtually bloodless revolution, moral reform, and that was the end of absolutist kings there. And England has been the better for it since, but except for the last 100 years, which then evolved into an absolutely out of control government, unlimited. And you have also, with this, you've had it reinforced or funded by the central banks, who have been corrupted from managing the currency to supposedly managing the economy. But in effect, what they were really doing was providing unlimited funding to yet another experiment in unlimited government. And so the whole phenomenon of expanding an intrusive government is rested upon the ability to extract money out of the citizenry. And that's done through taxation, which is becoming confiscatory. And it's done through currency depreciation and debt issue. The whole thing is a perpetual funding bubble. And it is highly unstable. And somewhere in here, you'll get the major crack in the financial markets. Now, you've already had a tremendous increase in government rates of interest in Canada, the United States. Also, interest rates for the 10-year notes in Europe have been rising. That's a start. Now, what has happened here is you've had the action swing over into low-grade corporates, because you take a look around the world and you look at the yields in the U.S. and you look at the corporate bonds, hey, they're going to get a decline in tax rates down to a proposed 15%, and you're going to get a major reduction in regulations. It's better for business. So this is one of the other things that really marked up the price of low-grade bonds. And, for the companies, it's very good, but a lot of it's in the market. And take a look at how this could impinge upon Canada. And you look at southern Ontario, the industrialized part is serious. And right across the river, you have Detroit and you have Michigan. You have very depressed real estate in Michigan. And then you would have the inspiration of a tax drop to 15% and the elimination of any number of regulations. And the people in the Windsor side are going to take a look at that and say, uh-oh. So I can see the reform in the United States spreading into Canada, across the river from, let's put it this way, symbolically from Detroit to Windsor. It's going to be fun to watch.
Bob, all the best of the season to you and your family.
And the same to you, Jim, and to our listeners out there. Have a very good Christmas and a very good New Year. And we'll talk to you in the New Year.
My guess
or maybe next week.
Yes. Hopefully, Bob, next week.
Yep.
My guest is market historian Bob Hoye. He's the chief investment strategist for Institutional Advisors. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. Questions for Bob can be forwarded to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Merry Christmas.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.